Mayoral forum. We're grateful to have both the candidates, Steve Schul and Farad Ali. We are grateful to you, the citizenry, for showing up. I know early voting has already started. Some people have already even voted, but this is your opportunity to get the candidates to go on record, to hold the candidates to account, to survey the two men, one of whom will be our next mayor, about what it is they will do about the policies that are important to you, the citizens. We've talked in the past at these Mayor Up forums. This is our 4th Mayor Up forum about how important civic engagement is, how they don't govern alone, that they will govern with you, the people, and through you, the people. So we're very happy everyone is out here. We will be doing the Mayor Up hashtag to follow along on Twitter. We'd like to briefly thank all of our sponsors, of course, the Rickhouse, who let us be here tonight, Sonic Pie, the guys doing the great sound, Shadowbox doing the filming, my partner in cohort, Heather Cook, who helped make this happen, along also with Gridworks Durham, Carolina Partners in Mental Health Care, Urban Durham Realty, St. James Seafood, the 21C, and the Durham Hotel, all of whom help make this possible because these things do not happen for free. So we are grateful to have you. We are grateful to have the candidates. We are looking forward to an interesting exchange of ideas and these gentlemen going on the record. We did a coin flip for opening statements. We're going to do a 3-minute opening statement, and Mr. Steve Schul is going to go first.
Drop the mic, he said. Already the jokes start. So I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you to the Clarion Content. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Heather. And thanks to all the sponsors. Thanks to the folks at the Rickhouse. And it's good to be out here. The issue that faces our city is this. Will the city we love be a city for all? That's the big issue that faces us, and I think we all know that. And I think that there are 3 big challenges that we face that really speak to that for me. And the first is this. Will everybody be able to share in our newfound prosperity? 80% of us do share in that newfound prosperity, and that's fantastic. But there are 20% of our people, mainly people of color, who don't share in that prosperity. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that people are able to get good jobs at good wages, that people have affordable housing that they can live in, and that they have good transportation that they can get to those good jobs. So is everybody able to share in our newfound prosperity is critically, critically important. And the second thing is this. Durham is a place of wonderful values, and the big issue for us there is, are we able to do 2 things? Are we able to project those progressive values out into the rest of the state and the nation? Are we able to become a beacon of progressivism and progressive values for the state and the nation? And are we able to live those values at home? So for example, we have a misdemeanor diversion court here in Durham, which is a way in which we live our values despite what the state legislature does. We have a faith ID here in Durham, which is a way we are able to live our values, a faith ID that undocumented people can use, that the city council has endorsed and the police recognize, despite what the state legislature does. So can we project our values abroad in this state and nation in the era of Trump and the era of this conservative legislature, and can we live them at home? And then the third thing is this. We're growing tremendously. We're growing at the rate of 20 people a day moving here to Durham. That's a lot. And so here's the big issue for us as we grow. Will we be able to maintain our wonderful and enhance our wonderful small city quality of life, or will we see that quality of life diminish as we grow? We know that's happened in many communities. If you're a drive around North Raleigh, you know that's not a place you want to be driving or living, frankly. If you are driving around the suburbs of Washington, D.C., you know the same thing. And we have to make sure that as we grow, we're enhancing rather than diminishing our wonderful small city quality of life. So those, I think, are the 3 challenges that face us. We want Durham to be an inclusive, prosperous, welcoming, green city. We want to make our city a place where where everyone is able to share in our prosperity, where we welcome robust debate and respectful debate, where we protect the vulnerable among us, and where we are a progressive beacon for the South and the nation. And I think that together we can do that. And that's what I hope we will all keep in mind as a community as we move forward, is to be able to be that beacon, and I think we can. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening. How are you all doing today? Great. You can talk back with us, and I'll tell you a little bit about the platform of, we walk around there and say, what's your platform or what's important? So I'm Farad Ali, and I'm running for mayor, and this is our 25th forum, and we really love doing these. We're going to have probably 2 more before it's over because we like to engage our public. But I do want to talk about the impact of our community. When I think about Durham, I think about a seesaw, and how when a seesaw is balanced, it's right here. You have the same weight on both sides, and it allows for people to share in that balance. But then when I look at Durham, I understand that we do have some issues that make that seesaw tilted in some spaces. So while we assure economic development, the best of us are getting the benefit of it, and the worst of us are getting the least of it because we don't have enough focus on it. When I think about poverty, you see people getting richer, and people are getting poor in services. When I think about economic development, I see economic development growing on this side, and this side still low. When I think about job creation and job training, I see that we have more opportunity for people who are already prepared and getting these opportunities than people who are down here. So when we start talking about issues around poverty and economic and jobs, I say that's an opportunity for us. With every opportunity is the obstacles we have to overcome, but nothing happens without a plan. So when we talk about the statistics of poverty and we start talking about what's the plan for corrective poverty, those are jobs. Having a plan for getting people more jobs and getting them to have wages that allow them to have a sense of dignity. When you start talking about economic development, there's this big conversation about gentrification and buildings. I'm saying we need to build people while we build buildings. We need to understand that as we build buildings, that we can build communities, and we can also let people be better off. I told the story before, and I believe that Durham can have the same plan that we had in Brooklyn, New York, when IBM made a decision to put a plant in the middle of Bedford-Stuyvesant on Gates Avenue, and made a decision to hire 60% of the people from the community. Those 60% of the people got a job. They were able to make livable wages, get insurance, build their house, buy the brownstone, create wealth, and build themselves and their families in their trajectory for life. My aunt benefited from that, and all those kids on that side of the family, I think it's now 12 of them, have all been college educated. The trajectory of people's lives are changed by when we have shared prosperity. But shared prosperity doesn't go together without a plan. So when we talk about job training, I've worked on job training plans with the U.S. federal government, with the state of North Carolina, and with the city of Durham. So I'm not talking about it like it's an academic. I got strategies for it, and I can talk about those today if you like. Jobs pull people out of poverty. Also, entrepreneurship pulls people out of poverty, particularly those people who are of color, because right now, jobs are not going to big companies anymore. It's really going to people who are entrepreneurial or hustlepreneurial, or people who have to find a way to do that. So training people to be entrepreneurs so they can determine their own destiny, that's work I'll already do right now with the Institute of Minority Economic Development. We've created over $1 billion in opportunities for financing and in jobs. The last thing is around moving people out of their situation to a new place in affordable housing. I finance projects for apartments, for communities, and actually finance helping families get to their first home and understand the impact of the lives of the people. So when I come to you and I'm asking to run for mayor, telling you I've got practical ideas that we can implement to make our city better. And I think that we can do this, but it's going to take some intentionality, some planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if people who are here do want to submit a question, Heather is collecting questions. There are cards by the door where you can add questions. We have been taking questions online for the last week or two. Much like the coin flip, we're just going to alternate. So Steve gave the first speech. Farad Ali will answer the question first. This first question is, if someone came to you saying that this election is now a black versus white election, what would you say to that person about this election and about how you will serve as mayor going forward?
That question is not clear. Steve is white, I am black. Steve is older, I'm a little bit younger. Steve may be smarter and I may be not as smarter. Steve went to Duke, I went to Carolina. There are differences in everybody in this room. There's probably no two twins in here, right? Right? Oh, amen, hallelujah. So there is some differences between Steve and I. When you make it just about our skin color, I think you become limited to your ability just to see things for what they are. But the heart of Steve and my heart is still pure. We want the best for Durham. So I think understanding that, how do we take the best of both of us and make it for the best outcome for the city of Durham? I don't run from the fact that people of color are probably the most affected by the lack of inclusion for economic development or for poverty or for job training. That's not a secret. Right? We know that there's more white wealth in Durham than there is black wealth in Durham or Latino wealth in Durham. That's obviously no secret either. But the issues of how do we make sure that we create some prosperity and shared prosperity is important. So I don't think Steve and I differ on that, but we obviously came from two different tribes. And I think God made us of different tribes so that we can identify with one another. It doesn't mean that we are superlative or inferior. That's something that we have done as man. But I think we've been created different so we can identify and work with one another. And until we start practicing that in the work that we do and inclusion, not just diversity, because diversity is here. Inclusion means that we work together and make some things happen. Until we get to that point in Durham in all spaces, then we're going to continue to have this bifurcation of opportunity.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, I think that Farad did a great job answering that. I'll just add a couple of little things to it. So, one of the things about Durham that I think makes it a very interesting city is, and our mayor, Bill Bell, is here tonight, and he says this a lot, which is we're a city without a majority. We don't have a racial majority in Durham. There is no, and that's not unique, but it is a really interesting and important fact about Durham, and a great fact about Durham. And so one of the things, though, that I think is also another really important fact about Durham is that for the past at least couple of decades, we have had genuine racial power sharing in Durham when you think about our elected officials. So think about our county commission. Our county commission is majority white. Our city council is majority African American. Our school board is majority African American. We have an African American mayor. We have an African American school superintendent. We have a white city manager. We have an African American county manager. You get the idea. I think it's something we've done really well in Durham, and I think it's something we can be really proud of. It's an important source of pride for us. What I will say, though, that we haven't done as well, and this is very understandable, is that we haven't done as well by our Hispanic community in that way. So there's never been, to my knowledge, a Latino local office holder or state legislator in Durham, even though our population is about 15% Latino. So I think, and of course, that their voting representation is lower than that. But that is something that we really need to work on. We need to include our Latino population in this power sharing that I think has worked so well for us. So, and then finally, I see Aaron hovering. Maybe that means I'm supposed to stop talking. But I will just say one more thing, which is that one of the other good things about the fact that we have no racial majority is that to get elected, we both have to get votes, and a lot of votes, from people who are not of our race. And so I think that really helps Durham in a lot of ways as well. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do my best to keep the hovering down to subtle. Justin is both trying to time and manage the social media, so he's giving me subtle signals, and I'm supposed to be giving you subtle signals. We miss our timekeeper, Meredith Martindale of Picture Durham, clearly tonight.
I'm really glad she's not here. She was really kind with that timekeeping.
Yeah, she was tough, right? I'm much more of a softie. They're over there being like, stop, he's over time. I've let both of you guys go a little. We are trying to do 90 seconds per answer. So I guess, Steve, you'll go first on this one. This question was kind of submitted in two ways by people who are here tonight. A little bit duplicative, but kind of just highlights the concern that people have. So how do you plan to ensure that Durham's growing economic structure and budget is inclusive of individuals from low-income backgrounds? And I feel like along the same lines would be, how do you propose to ensure that all of Durham enjoys economic success, not just downtown? I wanted to read both because I wanted you guys to know that this is really on people's minds. Thank you. 90 seconds.
So I think that in many ways that's the most important issue that we face, and so those are great questions. So here's what I'd say. On the wages and job side, There are many things that we can do. But it's harder to influence that than it is on the affordable housing side of this equation. So let me talk a little bit about the affordable housing side, and maybe we'll get to talk about, maybe Farad will talk about the wages and hiring side. But what I'll say about this issue is, if we want Durham to be affordable for everybody, we have to work on affordable housing. We have to make sure that people have a place that they can go home to every night that's safe, that's warm, that's dry, and that's affordable to them. And that means that we have to have a strategy to do that so that people can continue to live in this city, and especially in the near downtown neighborhoods, because gentrification is real, the market forces are real, and prices are going up and driving people out. We know that. So here's some of the things I think we need to do. First of all, we need to leverage our public land to build affordable housing, as we're about to do over behind the Durham station, our bus station on Jackson Street, with 2 acres, where there's now a proposal, which the council is supporting, to build 80 units of affordable housing right there. So that's an example. Fayette Place. We also have now purchased, with $4 million of your tax money, 19 acres at the top of Fayetteville Street, where we're going to be redeveloping in the next few years, and that will include affordable housing. So using that public land. Second is, I think equally important, and perhaps more important, is helping the Durham Housing Authority, where our most vulnerable residents live, 6,000 people. The average income is $13,000 per family, and we need to redevelop those crumbling housing authority communities so that people can live there and live well there. And we need to make them mixed income communities, especially the larger ones. And I see Aaron hovering, we can talk more about that. But I think that one of the keys, if we're going to be serious about making Durham prosperous for everybody, is people have to have an affordable place to live. I have a big strategy for it on my website, which you can look at, and maybe we'll get to talk about it a little bit more tonight. But I think that is absolutely critical.
Thank you.
Yeah, complicated question. I'm going to try to address some of it. Again, 90 seconds doesn't give you the right to get that all done. But I will talk about the affordable housing, just kind of capitalize on what Steve was saying, is that we need to create an affordable housing strategy from homelessness to home ownership. We talk about the importance of building homes for people in homelessness. How do we move to transitional housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, and even home ownership? Listen, if 20% of our population is in poverty, and we know that most of those are people of color, and we know during the last recession that most of the people who lost their wealth the greatest were people of color because they lost their housing, then we need to create a strategy for them to be able to create the wealth so they can be able to continue to move forward. So when you start saying that we have people in affordable housing and other spaces, and they've been in there for 20 years, we failed. It doesn't give you a sense of success as a progressive to know that, yeah, we've got some people in affordable housing and they're in public housing and they're making a little bit of money. We need to find a transition plan to get them out. So I'm one of those kids, so I can speak to it, that until my parents got a good job and allowed me to get to a home and then he can get a VA loan to pay for me to go to college, then I would not be here. So the success of making sure that we create from a strategy from homelessness to home ownership is not just important for the least of our communities, for the best of our communities. And in that place, guess what? The city also benefits. Guess how we collect probably 80% of our taxes? Or 70%, depending on if you got fact finders or the independent in here checking my plagiarism. But depending on how you look at it, most of the taxes are paid from home ownership, because our homes are being the ones that we're paying the taxes. So the more home ownership that we have from people who are diverse, Latino, African-American, and white, the more tax base that we have to do more services. So having a plan that's consistent and congruent, where we can work with the whole community, is better than to work on a partial plan because we're trying to solve an issue to make us feel better. Because communities don't want to feel better, they want to be better.
Thank you very much. If you're watching at home, you can get in on the debate at the hashtag MayorUp. This is a particularly poignant and relevant question, speaking of hashtags, in the era of the hashtag #MeToo, which we have all hopefully been living with an awareness of. This person wrote, as men in positions of power, what is your role in promoting safety for women in our community? How do you deter abusive behaviors and work to end systemic abuses of power and privilege? I believe, Farad, you go first.
Yeah, I think it's important that we recognize that women are becoming positions of power. We have more women in college than we have for men, and that has also put more women in positions of power in corporations. We also see that women start businesses faster and hire more women so they can get experience, so they can be also entrepreneurs faster than any other group, men, women, black, white, whatever. But women are really becoming really a key element. They're being finally recognized for all the great successes that they can do in the work. As City Council, I think it's important that we recognize not just women's issues, but everyone's issues to make sure they're treated fairly. I don't think anyone should have abuse. It's not, one time I was talking to a group of like, how do we understand that there's the impact of abuse, domestic abuse? And I said, well, it's not just men on women, it's women on men, it's people on older people that they may be taking care of if you're taking care of a parent, or even abuse for a child. We don't want abuse anywhere. So the place where the city will see front line of that would be maybe with our police department, and also in some of the county will see it in social services, is how do we make sure that we have informed decisions on how to help our police officers and our fire officers and our EMS to recognize when they see abuse and get people the supportive services they need to be better off. Our community needs to be holistic in that we respect people for who they are, black, white, rich, poor, women, men, and all, whatever the situation is. So I think it's important that when we talk about abuse, it's abuse for anyone. And then that abuse needs to be handled in a way that we can get them the services they need. I know Duke Regional Hospital is building a psychiatric ward if they need to go there. Or if the police are finding opportunities to redirect people because of an abusive situation, that they can pull people apart and put maybe one person in one setting for them to get well and another person in another setting to get some counseling. Whatever we need to do to make sure that we don't have this is really bad because, it's really good because the bad effects of abuse may be related to maybe a mental condition or some stress that we need to address in our community.
Thank you very much.
So, great question, and it's really nice to get a question for the first time.
Yes.
So thank you. Most of the questions we get, we've heard them before, but this one we haven't, and I think it's a great question. So the first thing I would say is we need to make it absolutely, utterly clear that sexual harassment or unwanted sexual advances by men in position of power or men at all is unacceptable. And we have to make that clear. We have to be vocal about that, and that needs to be something that is, and as people with positions of responsibility in the community, we need to be saying that and making it clear. And the Me Too hashtag and that phenomenon of the past few weeks has just been absolutely amazing and disheartening in ways because of how much of this sexual harassment that it reveals, but also heartening in the way that people are willing to be standing up and speaking out. And for those people who are standing up and speaking out, we need to speak up on their behalf. We need to encourage that. We need to call them, we need to tell them how brave they are, and we need to support them in speaking out, because speaking out is what's going to really make a difference. And then the other thing I want to say, and Farad touched on this, and I thought what he said was really excellent, which is I ride with young police officers on Saturday nights, and they are in very difficult situations a lot. And sometimes they do encounter these abusive situations, and they need to be extremely well trained. So part of what we need to do with our police in all instances is make sure that they are very well trained, not just to fight crime, but in all kinds of crisis intervention. And, of course, abuse is a crime, but it is also a mental health crisis in some circumstances, or an alcohol crisis. And we need our police officers to be able to come into these delicate, often difficult domestic situations and be able to deal with them very well, to be able to make sure that women are protected and protected at all times. And I think that that's a critical role that our police are often asked to play on the front line. So, great question. I really appreciate getting it, and glad to have the opportunity for both of us to be able to speak out on that.
Glad to hear we got that question. Disappointed to hear that it's the first time that it's come up, but hopefully that'll mean from the bully pulpit when one of you gentlemen is mayor, we'll make it front and center. The next question is Louise Morris. If you're here, you said you wanted to read your question, so I'd be happy to hand you the mic.
It was recently announced that Duke is going to be pulling funding from the Bull City Connector. The Bull City Connector is a convenience for a lot of people. It is a necessity for others. It goes through the very heart of our city. As mayor, what will you advocate for the Bull City Connector's future?
So I didn't know that Duke had just made that announcement. I knew they were looking at it in the last couple of days. I hadn't heard that decision. So thanks for letting me know, or no thanks for letting me know. The city should continue to fund the Bull City Connector, but let me say something more about that. 20,000 people, we have 20,000 bus boardings a day. That's a lot of people getting on the bus. And we need to make sure that we have an excellent bus system. We've done a really good job of keeping our bus fares low. The average fare that a person pays is about 40 cents per ride. And that's pretty good. And we've expanded our routes recently. We've expanded we've diminished the time between buses on a lot of our routes from 30 to 15 minutes. We've established a second hub at the Village Shopping Center. But there's still a lot we need to do with our bus system. We need to continue to expand our bus system in that way, because it is critically important for people, especially people. A lot of our folks are riding not because they're riders of choice, but because that is what they can do for transportation. So I think one of the things we need to be doing is working overtime towards a fare-free system. And I will say that I think the university's involvement, Duke's involvement, will be part of getting to a fare-free system. Why is it in Duke's self-interest? Thousands of people are riding to Duke every day on our buses. It costs $18,000 per space to build a parking space and a structured parking deck. Every time a rider rides a bus to Duke, it's saving Duke money, and we ought to then be working with Duke to involve them in trying to make in working to make our system fare-free. The University of North Carolina has stepped in a few years ago and made the bus system in Chapel Hill fare-free for everyone. Ridership went up 30%. So it's expensive to do it. It's very expensive, and it's going to have to be done in stages, but we need the university's participation. I sometimes imagine what if I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor, what my first discussions would be like with the new president of Duke, and I definitely think that would be one of the topics. So thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Ferratelli?
Yeah, a little bit about the city system. So the city has an operational budget that focuses on providing city services that are really a part of your tax dollars. So from the standpoint of picking up your trash, paving the roads, and all those things that your taxes go towards. Then the city also has a part of their operation budget, enterprise operations, things where they receive revenue, they go against the expenses, and then there's a bottom line that the city subsidizes. So most bus systems in the USA are enterprise systems, and most of them collect some fare, and not most of them, some collect fares, and then they have expenses, and whatever the delta is what's covered. I believe, looking at the city's budget, it's about a $10 billion gap. So part of the taxes goes towards covering that $10 million gap, even with the support of Duke for some of the services. So we can get a fare-free bus service just by going up on taxes. That's the short answer. The second answer is recognizing that when we start looking in the future, what's the smart way for us to create a culture of using public transportation, like Coke. So we're going to have an increase in utilization we're going to have an increase in population, and we have great already destinations in our city between South Point, DPAC, and other communities that we have. So the bus system needs to be more robust, I believe. I believe we should have a more robust system that has more frequent stops. Additionally, I think Duke and other corporations can participate because it's a value add for getting their employees at places back and forth. And then we can ask them to participate in it because it's an economic benefit for them. So some of the companies that may be hiring people in places that if they need blue-collar workers or white-collar workers, they figure out that my employees are coming from a section of town to provide the bus service and support it. And that bus service needs to run longer, because if you have restaurants like downtown that stay open at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock and the bus service stops, it puts them in an unfair situation, and they may not have a smartphone to be able to call Uber or to afford it, particularly if they're working in a service job. So I think looking at a comprehensive strategy of the impact of the bus system, the tax dollars, and where we can find other partners to participate, including Duke. But it doesn't need to be just Duke. I think there's other corporations that can feel like there's some value add. RTP is going through a big growth spurt. And as it continues to go through this big growth spurt for corporations that are coming in town, as well as those that are already there that hired a lot of people like Fidelity, maybe we can get other partners involved with that process to be able to support our bus system.
Thank you very much. The next question, Rob Weldon. Are you here? You said you wanted to read your question? Yes, let me give you the mic. Appreciate you attending and asking a question.
Good evening. So what will be your response as mayor and political face of Durham when the state innovative school district comes to try to take over another DPS elementary school, as they strongly considered this year with Glenn and Lakewood elementaries? And knowing full well that the school board and the superintendent have a strong role in this, I think the push is going to be much stronger, and we're going to need a stronger political voice in standing up to that.
It's really a short answer, so I won't be long. One, recognizing that the value of that it sounds like you already know that this falls within the county government space, right? With the county commissioners really fund and manage the school system, as well as the school board even providing the managerial part of it. One of the things I talked about, I know the mayor does this right now, the mayor pro tem, the county commissioner chair and vice chair, and the school board chair and vice chair at meetings. I don't know if it's once a month, once a quarter, or whatever. But creating a strategy around the question was, what would you do? I would create a strategy around how we can align ourselves towards a message for the state government. That it would not just be the county saying their position, or the school board saying their position, or the city having our position. But we align ourselves as a place of government to say that Durham would not want this to happen, and we have a solution to make it better, and then they bring along our state representatives to support our work. That would be the strategy that I would use to make sure that the face would not just be the mayor's face, but it would be the community's face.
Thank you very much.
So, Farad, I've just noticed that Shay Ramirez and Pierce Freeline are here, and I wonder if they want to come up and take the rest of these questions. Some of our fellow mayoral candidates. What I would say is this. We need to speak with one voice against the takeover of any of our local schools by state government, by this new district. We need to have local control of our local schools. I thought our school board did a great job in parents and teachers organizing when Lakewood and Glenn were threatened with this, and we need to be speaking out strongly about that. While we don't have a direct role in governing education, that's just, the state and the county, and I was on the school board, so I know a lot about that actually. But here's what I'd say. This is another place where we have to project our Durham values as strongly as we can. We may not win, but we have to be talking as strongly as we can about our Durham values and what they are. And here's what they are. Not only in terms of this question that you ask, but also in terms of education in general. So we have about 2,000 teachers in Durham Public Schools, a little bit more than that. Half of them have been teaching for 5 years or less. And as long as that's true, we are not going to be able to give our students the kind of education that they need. We all know that there's some good young teachers, but being a veteran teacher and being experienced and not having this churn in our schools is critically important. So we have to tell the legislature, you got to start paying our teachers well. You have to give them the support they need, whether it be teacher assistance, training, professional development. All those things we have to be advocating for as strongly as we can. Because everything we do in Durham and the success of our city is critically tied to that. As whichever one of us is fortunate enough to become mayor, will be able to speak out on this issue. And speaking out on this issue is very, very important. We don't control it, but we have a voice in it. Let's use that voice.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Shay Ramirez and Pierce Freelon for being here too. And I'd like to say just briefly, it should be a reminder to all of us that civic engagement does not begin and end with our elected officials. There are far, far more citizens and far more members of the public, and your voice will always be louder than theirs. Your voice should motivate their action. So I'm really glad to see people who know that the process just keeps going and continues their engagement. Thank you for coming. Thank you everyone who is here, but I'm glad to see the candidates as well. This next question was submitted by Karen Factor. She wants the question read for her. The question says, many Latinos have problems getting green cards, which would give them legal status. What do you think you, as mayor, can do about that for people who live in Durham?
So, with one exception, which I'll talk about in a minute, again, we don't have any direct control over this. But again, you know, I am constantly asked as a city council member, will I come and will I stand with or march with the Dreamers? Do I support DACA and its continuation? And we have to be speaking again as a community with one voice, an inclusive voice for everybody in our community, that we welcome you, that we embrace you, and that we don't make a distinction about whether or not you have your documents when we say that. And so that is really an important thing that we need to make clear as a Durham value. And then there's certain actions that we can take that will help keep people out of the involvement with ICE and the deportation system. And that includes one of the things our police chief has done is stop having license plate checkpoints, which has been unhappily engaging people in the with ICE when that didn't need to happen over these very small things. And our police chief has stopped doing that. Another thing that we do, and we've done since I've been on the council for 6 years and prior to that, is we don't have our police officers doing the immigration enforcement work of ICE. And again, I think that's really important, and I appreciate our chief's stance on that. We also have what's called a faith ID. I carry it, and I could get it out for you, and I pass it around. Maybe I will in a minute. But what it is it's issued by El Centro Hispano, and El Centro it issues this ID to people who are undocumented, and they carry this ID. It is used by our police force, is recognized by our police force, is recognized by our school system and libraries. And this ID is endorsed by the city council and our police department. It's a Durham workaround. It's a Durham workaround the fact that undocumented people don't have driver's licenses. It doesn't count as a driver's license, but police want an ID when they see you, so they don't have to haul you down to jail. So it's a Durham workaround. But there is one area that where we do have some direct, not control, but influence over the ability of people to actually get some sort of documentation. And that's an interesting area, and it's called the U visa. And the way the U visa works is this. If you are a person undocumented who helps someone else, who helps the police with the solution of a crime, then you can be certified by the police or the district attorney's office for having helped with that, and that will help you get what's called a U visa, so that you can stay in this country for having helped people solve crimes. That keeps our community safer. It helps undocumented people come out of the shadows to want to help us keep a safe community. And so we need to be encouraging the use of that certification as much as we can. That's our only direct, at least as far as I know, ability to influence whether or not someone has documents. But it is one important way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great answer. And I'm going to edify everything that Steve said, but I also want to talk about the importance of the Latino population in our community. They are part of the fabric of the way we work and what we do. So I serve on the board of the Latino Community Credit Union, and we have undocumented clients, and we understand that they buy cars, they buy homes, they have businesses, and they also support our tax base. And so when we start talking about understanding the impact of any deportation or any federal law that would adversely affect the fabric of our community, this is when I talk about One Durham, when we come together as a family to protect one another. When we recognize that people are our cousins and our brothers and our sisters, and when we see that when they are getting affected, it affects our entire community. I'm not sure everyone understands the plight of the Latino population, particularly as it relates to not just this one issue around federal, but also an inclusion in business opportunities, getting jobs, and getting opportunities to move forward in their lives. So building, I created, when I first started to run, I created a Latino work group, and we meet, and when we started talking about the issues in the community, I was like, those were the issues that African Americans had in the 60s. We need to move you up faster and get you included and integrated in our community and more respected. And you shouldn't feel like this. You should feel like a full citizen, not 3/5 of a citizen. And we should be more conscientious in how we treat them. So in addition to surrounding ourselves around our cousins and our brothers and our sisters around the protection from the federal government, we too need to be more sensitized to their journey as they live here in Durham.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate these questions. I've heard from some people in the last week about, well, why would I come to the Mayor Up Forum if I've already made a decision about who I'm going to vote for? But I think these last few questions illustrate why you would. It's an opportunity to hold these gentlemen accountable for their values, hold them accountable for the promises they are making to us about how they will treat our Durham citizens, our Durham residents, our Durham public, frankly, you, in the future. This next question is a combination of several questions, but it seems like it's been very much on folks' mind. What can the city do to improve safety for pedestrians and bicyclists? I know we have people who biked here tonight, walked here tonight, and I know this is definitely, at least in my cohort, a question that we hear a lot. So I'd love to hear the answer.
So the city has a plan now for improving the roads, and we've talked about creating bike lanes and that whole process. You know, it's so expensive. You know, I'm trying to keep it real. It's not easy to just go in and tear roads out and make a bike lane and create sidewalks. It's a really expensive project that they have it on the CIP over a period of 5 or 10 years. Particularly when you have sidewalks and the spaces that have been under disrepair and hasn't been a focus because it wasn't necessarily on the plan. But it is important as we look at improving our roads or even developing new roads that we have a focus and an attention for bike lanes and sidewalks to build healthy communities. But it's just not about bikers, it's really about our community health, right? Having the ability to have public spaces, sidewalks, and bike lanes provide for people to be able to get out and walk and have a greater public health. Duke University has this Durham Healthy 2020 to talk about some of the social determinants of health and how we need to have more roads and more bike lanes to have a more healthier community. But it's also important to recognize that kids use these bike lanes, and my child goes to DSA, and you're looking at crosswalks. We need crosswalks in places where we have high traffic areas. So it's bringing a value, social conscious to improving the road system, not just for bikers, but for walkers and also for drivers to be more conscientious, to slow down and to know how to drive when you have bikers. I think there's an education that we can have as a community around how do we deal with bikers on the road as drivers and not to necessarily go after them because of our rushing or whatever it may be. So we've improved American Tobacco, and we've new roads have had bike lanes added to them, and sidewalks are on the pipeline to be built. But I do want to make sure citizens understand that redoing our streetscape and our sidewalkscape and all this can be done, but it is very expensive, and it does take time to do it as you have all the priorities. But it can be done, but the whole process of it just will take some time.
Thank you very much. Steve Schul.
So I bike a lot. I ride my bike around here a lot, and sometimes I feel very safe depending upon where I am in terms of traffic, and sometimes I feel very unsafe. And I'm sure that all of you all who ride your bicycles around feel the exact same way. So here are some of the things that I think we can do. First of all, some of the things we are doing. So we had a capital improvement plan process in the city council a couple of years ago, and we reaffirmed it last year that our number one priority in terms of capital improvement plan spending is sidewalks. We're spending about $20 million in the next 5 years to build new sidewalks and to make links in sidewalks where they're, there are places where they're not connected. And so we have a big commitment coming up for sidewalks, and I think you'll see the results of it. Farad is so right. It's really expensive. To build sidewalks with curb and gutter included is about $1 million a mile. So think about that. It's very, very expensive, but we have to do it. We're in many places we're a sidewalk poor city, and we have to change that. Second thing we have to do is bike lanes. We have about 40 miles of bike lanes that we've put in place in the last few years, and we're looking to do about 18 miles in the next couple of years, 18 more additional bike lane miles. So those are really important. Third thing is that we're now just got funded from some federal funding through the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a 3-county organization of public officials that I chair. One of the things that we've gotten through that now is funding for bike boulevards. And so we'll be starting to see some bike boulevards in Durham, as well as a dockless bike share, which is not a safety thing, but just an interesting advance in our bicycle infrastructure and culture. But bike boulevards will be funded. And then the other thing is trails. I mean, one of the things about safety is if you're cycling on a trail, you're a lot safer than if you're cycling on a street. And we're working really hard to expand our trail system, and we need to continue to do that. So we are going to be building the Beltline. We have funded the Duke Beltline, which is 2 miles up through downtown and up into the northeast, which is going to be a wonderful trail. And there are 5 other priority trails all over Durham, in all parts of Durham, which are on the books now and which are at least partially funded. So trails, bike lanes, sidewalks, bicycle boulevards. And the last thing I would say that's really important, though, is educating drivers. Educating drivers. I mean, if we are serious about safety, pedestrian safety, and bicycle safety, we have to educate drivers.
Yeah, I see snaps in the crowd from that, from people who ride bikes. Tell your friends. We have had way too many people in Durham seriously injured and even killed by drivers who are hurrying somewhere that if they got there 5 minutes later is certainly not worth somebody's life. The next question, this person did not sign their question, but it does seem like one of those ones we might not have heard before. I haven't heard it. Durham has great exposure to the healthcare industry and substantial exposure to the IT industry. Which other industries would you like to attract to Durham to drive job and wage growth? And what industries do you view as our industries of the future? Seems like an interesting question, something that we haven't heard tons about.
I think if I get to be elected mayor, I know exactly how I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to sit down with Farad Ali and I'm going to ask him what he thinks. I'm serious. I mean, I think that's one of the, that's one of the good things about if you happen to get to be elected mayor, you can ask people who know a lot to help you. And I'm sure he'll tell you in a minute, he's on the committee to try to bring Amazon here. So I respect his work in this very much. Here's what I think the real issue is not what sector that we have here. It is, are the jobs, are we preparing our people to get these jobs? So Durham pays the best wages in the state. It's not really an issue for us that we have the wrong sectors or don't have enough good jobs. Of 100 counties in the state, we have the best wages. Here's the issue. Here's who's getting those jobs. 60% of them are held by people that don't live here. They drive in from Johnston County. They drive in from Roxborough. They drive in from Wake County. Some of us are going to work at University of Chapel Hill and that kind of thing, but net, we're a huge magnet for people to come in and take our jobs. And the issue for us is, how do we make sure that we are preparing our residents to take these good jobs? It doesn't matter what, we are well endowed with jobs. That's not our issue, and good paying jobs. The issue is, are our folks prepared to get them? I talked earlier about the school system, which I think is critical. We're either going to have the school system that helps our kids get those jobs, which means paying teachers well enough and supporting them well enough, or that's not going to happen. And then there are these other aspects of it that are very, very important as well. We need to be making sure that we are that we are training people in the job training programs that the city runs very well and doing a great job of connecting them to these jobs. We need to be fully leveraging any incentives that we give to make sure that we're working with partners who are serious about employing minority and women firms. We need to make sure that we have many individual subcontractors in Durham that we need to help develop into become, we have a reputation, as you all know, as being the capital of black capitalism, of black business, Black Wall Street, Pear Street. But we haven't lived up to that reputation in the last few years. I recently saw figures since 2008. We are lagging other cities in North Carolina in terms of African American business formation. We have to change that. So we have to help. We have many individual subcontractors that we have to help with expertise and capitalization so that they can become not only talented individuals, but also can build businesses around that. So capitalization for minority businesses, technical expertise for minority businesses so that they can succeed, and getting our folks ready to take the jobs that we have here, which we have lots of good ones. Let's help them get ready to take them.
Thank you.
All right, great answer. And I just want to be supportive of helping, and this is some understanding of how this works. So Durham is growing. We're the 4th largest city. We have great corporations. We have great entrepreneurs. We have great things happening. We don't necessarily have, we're not a great city for accessing capital. We usually have to go to San Francisco or New York. But when you have one organization like an IBM or Lenovo or an Amazon that comes to your town, it provides jobs for that that entity. Then there's all these secondary jobs that happen secondarily because they need supplies and goods and services that they don't make or develop. And then there's this third impact of the job impact, of the economic impact of them being in your community by being philanthropists and building. I think we need to recognize, how do we look at the assets of our corporations and what value that they bring to us? Measuring the impact that they bring to us, one, by their investment in their community, the jobs that they bring to our communities, as well as how they support our communities by having utilization of women and minorities and even local dollar spends in practice. And I think we can maximize that. That's a very easy way for us to measure the impact of corporations that are in Durham, and how we can help those corporations to have jobs preparedness, and also other businesses to support them as they need other services, from janitorial to law to consultant services, to build their businesses to be the best. We're already doing this at places like IBM and BD and Lenovo and Fidelity. The second part of this equation, though, is in the job development, is that we understand what they need and create these job training programs through some of the federal dollars that we're already getting for our workforce development, so that we can train kids between 18 and 24 to be able to be gainfully employed and get these opportunities, recognizing that some of them may have felonies that we may need to expunge or look at, because they can be repurposed in a way that can help them to get over that and build a community and be citizens that are great for our communities. Last piece is, let's look at the genesis of this. I look at the school system as a workforce development. I've got 4 kids. I want them all to get jobs. And if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because my payroll gets weaker, right? And you start understanding that I want my kids to learn early how to be able to be gainfully employed. So this becomes an opportunity for us to teach kids at a young age about entrepreneurship. Teach them at a young age how to prepare for jobs for the future. Teach them at a young age to decide, when they're in 12th grade, should I go to college and get $100,000 in debt and major in art and then not be able to get a job to support that $100,000 because my parents can't help me? Or do I take this art degree and use it to build myself a CAD where I can be an associate under an architect and build out some additional skill sets that allow me to go, I don't have to accumulate that debt, but then be gainfully employed. So I think we need to have in our school system innovation solutions for the jobs of the future. And this is where we take our greatness and our entrepreneurs that are in American Tobacco and other incubators and bring them to the schools to do cool things like Shay was doing, helping to build ladies in confidence at an early age so they can feel like they are empowered. Or like Pierce was doing with Black Space, to teach people that they should be encouraged about their artisticness or their design. I'm a linear person, they're non-linear, and how that can help them to build their confidence to do other things.
Thank you so much. Hope you gentlemen know we're going easy on you about the time. If Meredith was here, we'd be cutting you off like crazy. We're trying to be nice, trying to go soft. This next question is very specific. Came from the website. Do you believe Durham, and specifically Parkwood, could benefit from the public-private development models like the Cary SAS development? I believe this refers to something specific you said. Is that possible? Do we know the Cary SAS development? Do you gentlemen know what they're talking about in that regard? All right. I guess we'll skip for now that question because I'm not sure either.
I could plagiarize.
We do not encourage plagiarizing. We were just talking about the schools, right? That's not what we would teach our 4 kids.
Just playing.
All right. This next one is again about the schools and the income achievement gap. The income achievement gap is growing at a faster rate in North Carolina than any other state. Durham's black-white achievement gap stands now at 3 grade levels. Many DPS students are marked as failing, and yet the charter school system has shown it simply wants to resegregate Durham by race and income. What is the future of Durham education, and where does school choice stand? I think whoever spoke last should be first, so that would be you.
Can I read the question?
Sure. It says, what does the income achievement gap and the failing charter schools mean for Durham?
All right, so I'm going to try to address this question. If you're in the audience, please redirect me. But as I said earlier, I think that the school system is a workforce development issue, and we need to build our students to be able to get jobs and be productive citizens in our community. And if we can build them to have productive jobs and feel like they can take the skill sets that may not appear to be what we see today as people who are over 30 or 40 who think what jobs need to be. Because remember, when I was growing up, there was no Google, there was no YouTube, there was no Amazon. All these companies that are now making all this money are not companies that were there when I was there. So I was being trained to go work for a company that was finite, but these youth are actually operating in an infinite world where the websites and things that they're doing provide them opportunities to make gainful employment. So I think we should take our school system and prepare them with entrepreneurs, again, as I said earlier, to be a part of working with our school system and teachers around training our students for what's next and how they can be able to participate and how they can take these skills and transfer them and monetize them. So again, if you're an artist, how you can translate that into something that can work. In Philadelphia, they took some students that were doing graffiti at night on buses and trains and gave them buildings and walls to do this in their downtown area and then paid them for it. So we can change behavior by creating new opportunities for students to take their craft, whatever their craft is, and use it as an asset for our city and provide them resources so they can monetize that and to support them on an ongoing basis.
Thank you very much.
So when I think about this question, I think about Brown versus the board. Separate but equal is inherently unequal. And as our school systems resegregating, not just in Durham, but across the country, we are creating, again, separate and unequal school systems. And we have to do everything in our power to change that. Our power, again, the mayor of Durham has no direct power of the school system, but I do think we have to speak to it. So here's some of my thoughts about it. First of all, both of my kids went K through 12 to Durham Public Schools. And they got a great education. And that's the first thing I want to say. And I see one of my neighbors who also went K through 12 Durham Public Schools and got a great education. We have to be speaking out for our public schools. And those of us who have had the experience need to be telling everybody about that experience. Because we, as these, one of the things that I'm concerned about is the millennial families coming into Durham, the millennials coming into Durham, when they are starting to have kids, we need their kids going to Durham Public Schools. And those progressive values that they carry, they need to carry them into Durham Public Schools because that's part of being a progressive community. So I'll paint a quick picture of our school system now. Okay, think of it as a pyramid. The top 3% are people who are homeschooled. Then there are 12% of our students who are in private schools. Then there are 15%, or maybe now a little bit more than that, who are in charters. So 30% of our children, our families, are not in Durham Public Schools, and that makes it, the lack of those parents with resources, because by and large, most of them have resources and are able to choose at least from our Durham Public Schools, is damaging to the rest of us. And it's damaging, and our schools are resegregating, and they're resegregating by race, and they're resegregating by class. And that's something that we have to work against very hard. What I have seen that I think works is I have seen communities come together, black and white, to say, we are going to support our school. And parents are bringing their kids back into the schools, and I think, school by school, community by community, and I think that's what we have to be doing. But this is a critical issue. The person that raised this question is exactly right. Our kids need to go to school together. Our kids need to go to school together if we're going to have the kind of society that we want. And if they go to school together, we won't have separate but unequal. So that's where I think our goal should be.
Thank you very much. So just another question or two, and then we'll let these gentlemen give us a closing statement, and we'll let everybody get home, and we'll encourage you to go out to vote. Early voting does continue through Saturday. Keep in mind, you can vote. If you have already voted, just use this as an opportunity to encourage someone else in your neighborhood to vote. All right, the next question is, what is your vision for preserving the Hayti Community Culture Center from the pressures of gentrification and inequitable economic development?
So the question was, and I would love to know a little bit more about what motivated the question. The question, I think, is how do we protect the Hayti Cultural Center from the pressures of gentrification? And so, to my knowledge, the Hayti Cultural Center is not in danger from that, so I hope we can continue that. I have met recently with the director of the center, and they are financially doing better than they have in years, which is great, and a tribute to the wonderful, very small, nonprofit staff that they have that is operating the Hayti Center. It's a really important resource. And we need to ensure its support. The city is supportive of it every year financially, and we will continue to be, I'm sure. There's no one you know, to my knowledge, I've never heard any criticism of our funding of the Hayti Cultural Center, and we need to continue to support that. So, but I think that the larger issue, of course, is very, very critical, which is the pressures of gentrification, not just on residents, but on businesses and nonprofits and everybody who's operating in this new environment which we're in of rising prices. And I think that that's something we have to pay a lot of attention to. I don't have a lot of good solutions to it, but it's something that I feel like I have a lot of good ideas about how to do affordable housing and do it well, and I think we know how, and now we just have to have the will and do it. But I think we haven't really figured out affordable retail as well and cultural spaces. There are some exceptions to that, but I think that's something that the city needs to give some increasing attention to, and I would welcome the ideas of others in this room for how to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important that we convene the community to talk about what they'd like to see in this neighborhood. I think we do need to protect the Hayti Heritage Center from any gentrification because of already the abuse of disinvestment and roads and all the things that have happened in that community. You know, I'm a part of an organization that owns the Black Wall Street building, the original North Carolina Mutual building. And it's so interesting to talk about the Black Wall Street and to realize that there's no real ownership of black owners on the Black Wall Street anymore because we've experienced real gentrification. And so we would hate to have that same community to be affected by that. But a clear planning of how do you improve a community without changing the owners and letting the community's culture remain is the real opportunity for us. So there is some value. This is where Durham's values need to be expressed. There's value in having a Black Wall Street, especially when it's on a national landmark. It becomes a tourist destination. It becomes an educational center. It talks about how people came together around entrepreneurship and built a community and built houses and built their insurance and built wealth and created kind of a black capitalism. Well, the Hayti Heritage Center is really important to the culture of our community as well, and it sits on the street that has one of the first public HBCUs in the whole country or in the state at North Carolina Central University. So I think the whole corridor has a great opportunity to be a shining jewel in the crown of Durham, but we can't let it happen to them. We have to do it with them in a way that protects the culture of the community, that is not gentrified just to be gentrified for a big building, but that if you are going to do some improvements to the buildings, the Perry's and Perry has joint ownership of a building with the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. And what they've done is said, we're going to own this as a black organization with other black organizations, improve it so it can fit the current look and current model so that it is gentrified, but it's a nicer building for the community. So how do we do that without necessarily changing the ownership of the community so that the culture can be protected, but allow people to appreciate and have a community where they can come to get an understanding of its history, not just for black people, but for white people and Latino people and tourist people, because our cultures are all interlinked. So I think it's important that we work at a strategy and a plan for the Hayti Heritage Center all the way down to the bottom of, not from Durham, all the way down to Food Line.
Thank you very much. Last two questions here. This question is sad but true. Less than 20% of Durham will likely to turn out to vote in the upcoming election. How will you use your platform, and how do you use your platform to encourage civic engagement? Actually, it's Farad, Steve. Sorry.
You can.
I was struggling with an answer, so I'm glad you're going first.
You know, this is sad, right? I mean, you know, real talk. We've got. I thought the voting in the primary was not representative. It was less than the sample size for an accounting project. When we do accounting audits, the sample size is larger than the number of people who came out to vote. We have 198,000 people who are registered to vote in Durham, and only 13% came out. We should all be sad by that. We should all encourage more people to vote. We want the people who represent us to represent the community in which they are voting for, whatever that may be. I told people my campaign now is not just vote for Ali for One Durham, but to vote for you. And particularly in my community, I'm like, Steve and I were with the Duke Democrats. I was like, women have only been able to vote since what? Less than 100 years, or right at 100 years. African Americans and other groups have only been able to vote for the last 60 or 70 years. People died and fought and lost families and jobs for this right. And it's not just a right, but I think it's a responsibility. So I'm encouraging citizens, black, white, yellow, brown, green, blue, whoever, vote for your interests. Not just because I believe this election is pivotal for where we're going to go in the future, but because who wants to be elected with 20% of the people voting? That's not a referendum. That's just a sample size. Right? Amen? So, if nothing else, vote for you. And then vote for me. But vote for you, because if not, the outcome may not be what you like. And we've seen this show before, haven't we? Yeah, amen.
Thank you.
So in terms of voting, I really don't have much to add to what Farad said. I think that we need to do everything we can to encourage people to vote, but I do think we have to try to figure out why it is that people aren't voting. And I think there are two things. One is, frankly, just the kind of, not that Farad and I aren't stars, but the kind of star power orientation of the media. So that the presidential election is, so far outpaces what we're doing in other state races, and much more so even than municipal races, and them much more so than municipal races. And so I think that that's kind of a problem in our culture. But I also think the other thing is people would vote if they felt like local government really mattered to them. And we have to help people understand how it matters to them. So you get your street pay. So here's my favorite. I'll ask you this. When you turn on the tap, do you like to get as much water out of it as you want? Do you like it to be clean? Do you like it to be clear? Do you like it to be healthy? Well, local government does that, and we're spending $500 million in the next 5 years to make sure that that's happening with our water and sewer system. Local government matters to you if you like to, but in Durham, fortunately, we're a well-run city. We have an excellent city manager. We have an excellent city employees. So, we're not Flint, Michigan or anything close, so people take these services for granted. It's good that you can take the service for granted, but we need to educate people about the importance of these services. Do you care about what kind of police force that you have? Do you care if it's a police force that is effective at fighting violent crime and does so in a way that is never discriminatory and never racially profiles? If you care about that, it's local government that makes that happen. How we convey this message to people, we've obviously not done it well enough. Because if we had, we would have more people voting. But I think we've got to figure out a way to help people understand that it matters to them in their individual lives. And I'm not sure how. And a lot of people besides us have been trying to figure that out. But I think that's the key. People have to feel like it matters to them. So.
Thank you. And I think that's on all of us, ultimately, to figure out how to get our neighbors to vote. I know immediately after the primary, it felt like 3 out of every 4 people I talked to said they voted, and then I saw the statistics, and I was like, wait a minute, are 2 out of every 3 people I talked to lying? Am I talking to a particular sample size? What's going on? So don't hesitate to make your friends and neighbors feel guilty for not voting. Don't hesitate to challenge them on did they really vote, ask to see their sticker. If they voted, they should have one, all right? We want you out there. Gentlemen, one final question, and then we'll let you do your statements. This question is a little different, but if you do not win the election, what will you do next, is the question. So I know you've been thinking about nothing but winning. I know you're both confident that you're going to win, but somebody is going to have to think of something to do next. Steve, would you like to go first?
Well, win, lose, or draw, I'm going for 5 days to the mountains of Virginia and with my wife and not doing much else. That'll be first. And don't try to reach me by email. But you know, I would remain on city council, which is not my goal, but I would still be there and I would be doing that work. And I have a job. I teach at Duke, and I will continue to do that job and do that work. My commitments to Durham are, my commitment to Durham and its civic life is complete, and you know, that would not change. Yeah, so I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I win, we win. I lose, I learn. Because I don't lose. This is an election about the future. We have a chance to have, Steve wouldn't want me to say this, but I'm going to. You know, you get a chance to have both of us on council at the same time, if that's of value to you. But the only way you do it is to vote for me. And I'm sorry. Now,
I should have said I was going to quit.
Right. So, you know, you get a twofer right here. I'm just saying. That's how we're going to start the conversation, in the positive. Because I think we both bring assets to the community that we need, and we're connected to different parts of the community that we can come together to make One Durham a reality. I wouldn't have come up with a One Durham solution if I didn't feel like there would be an asset on council like a Steve Schul. And I think I had this conversation with Carl Risk. It's a situation of that Durham is at a pivotal point, and we can't talk about rich and poor if one is rich and both are rich. This is a city of black and white. We can't talk about that if it's one is black and the other one's black. We can't talk about all these different issues and not have a consciousness of the perspective of the other set of the people. So that's what I say. But I'm president of the Institute of Minority Economic Development, and I focus on issues that affect minorities and women around this whole country. And if for some reason I learned that this election was a nice exercise, then I will continue to serve our country, our state, and our city to make sure there's more inclusion and diversity in our workplace and the way we play and live and work together, because we still have a community, and not just in Durham, of this institutional racism and sexism and classism that is so pervasive that continues to bifurcate our communities and our cultures. And if we don't deal with this issue, the fracture will be filled with something else that we don't want. So I will continue to work on that gap, because that gap affects people, particularly people of color.
Thank you so much. So we're going to give both the candidates an opportunity to make a closing statement in just a moment. I do want to also thank, again, everyone who made this possible. The Rickhouse, if you haven't taken care of your bartender, please tip the bartender. Of course, my partner in organizing all of this, Heather Cook, thank you so much. Our friend Scott Wagner over there generously did that chalkboard. Justin Laidlaw running the hashtag in the social media, Shadowbox Filming, Sonic Pie doing the sound, and all the other sponsors who made it possible so we could have this civic engagement 4 times. These guys who were willing to go out and do 25 forums, they both admitted to me before this they're retired, yet they're still here willing to engage with you, the public, because we know that local government is important. We know that American democracy is important, and we know that democracy itself is challenged worldwide. We are the bastion of people who care about how our government is made. When they say we the people, it refers to you people and me and these guys. And unless we personally participate in the process, we will get the government we deserve. So it is up to us. I know I'm preaching to the choir because you're here on a Wednesday night at 8:15, but preach to the 3/4 of those people who haven't voted. If you think you know someone who hasn't voted or isn't voting or isn't sure if they're going to vote, please encourage them to get out there. There's a bunch of important city council races as well. There's city council candidates in the room tonight. There's other concerned citizens who have questions, and I'm sure the candidates will hang out for at least a little while afterward so you can ask them questions personally. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize. Thank you, gentlemen, so much, and I guess we will go with the reverse of what just happened on the last question. Fraud, you'll go first.
Yeah, not a problem. Great. So look, thank y'all for letting us come to our 25th forum. We've enjoyed this. We're glad the show is over. And we're running for office, and y'all know who we are. We've been through that spill, and I want to make sure we understand that this is a great opportunity to elect 2 people to city council. And I'll spend my time there. in that we have an opportunity to elect someone who's very good at affordable housing and someone who's very good at economic development, and an opportunity to engage us in a way that we can do something that's really good for this city. And so when we ask for your vote and prove out, is that we're already, the great part about this is Steve has been a servant to this city for 40 years, supporting a lot of progressive values and engaging. So leadership is not a question. And I've been serving the city in leadership, so it's not about discussing this from an academic standpoint, actually involved in spaces. So we get a chance to really make something great happen in this city. I look forward to people strongly, and we know people have strongly considered this opportunity for mayor, and we've had some great candidates, and also where we are today. So the important issues for now, I believe, in the city are around poverty, which is job training and building out that city. I feel like I've got experience and I'm doing it today in the work that I do today. Around affordable housing and economic development, I think economic development and affordable housing are cousins. They work well together. And to be able to partner them in a way that is benefiting our community is very important. And I believe that I have the experience base to prove that we've done it before and can give lots of examples and to discuss that, but this is not the forum to do it because we don't have enough time. And the third part is, how do we make sure we get jobs for people and prepare them for the jobs for the future? And that's going to create being a great collaborator and having the connectivity to the businesses, the private market, and the public market so that we can get people jobs so they can be better off, so they can get housing and make a greater impact in our community. And we can celebrate in a way that we can have more shared prosperity, so that 2 years from now or 4 years from now, we will have different subject matters, not the same ones over and over again, because we'll have a measurement system to figure out where are we on this temperature. How much better did we do for helping people get jobs? How much better did we do to help people get housing? And how much better did we do in making sure our people are ready and prepared to excel in shared prosperity? Thank you for your consideration. One vote, one voice, one Durham.
So we really have had 25 forums. It's not a joke. They only have 4 for President of the United States, okay? So I do hope that some of the organizations and people holding these forums, Aaron, will work with some other groups to help rationalize the system a little bit for future candidates.
Applause from Pierce Freelon in the back.
And Shay. So, and I do want to give a shout out to the candidates, all the candidates for mayor who we have been privileged to have all these forums with, but especially tonight again with Farad. Farad and I have spent the last month together having a lot of fun, and we were friends before that, but we really, continue to get to know each other well, and it's a privilege to be up here with him. So that's the most important thing I have to say. I do want to say that, again, what I said earlier about what I think the job of the mayor is, because I think this is important. The mayor has very little formal authority in Durham. If you're the mayor of New York City, if you're de Blasio, you come in and you fire the top 200 people, and then you try to enact your agenda, and we don't have that here. We have a city manager form of government, which I think is a good thing, because it's very anti-corruption. No one ever asked me for a job. No one ever asked me for a contract. And I think that that's a really good thing. And we have a very well-run city because that professional group of people makes it happen. But then what is the job of the mayor? And I think what the job of the mayor is, and I said this earlier, but I want to say it again, is to bring people together across difference to meet our common challenges, to form a common vision for what we want to see our city to be, and then to work together to implement that vision. I think that's the job. And I think that that's something that I have a lot of experience with. That's something I think I can do well, and I hope you all will give me the chance to do it. I'm very grateful for being here. I'm also very grateful that it's the last one. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks to the sponsors and the candidates. I'm sure they'll stick around here for you to bend their ear a little bit. I would say if you're able-bodied and able to help, we don't have anybody who stacks the chairs besides us. So if you want to do a little chair stacking, we're totally in favor of your assistance. Thanks again to the candidates. Thanks again to everybody for coming. More at Clarion Content Media /MayorUp. Appreciate it.